People call me all the time because when you get more expert in a field, more people know that's what you do. One of my long-time clients referred a good friend of his this week, and he called kind of out of the blue with an interesting story. I actually think a lot of people end up with this problem, so I didn't want to walk you through the story. What happened? I'm calling it the case of the accidental landlord. Now, what happened with this client is he was referred by a really good client, and the client basically said, hey, Jeremy's a miracle worker. His team has done thousands of these. He'll be able to help you with your problematic piece of rental property. Now, that is both true and not true. You can't fix everything. What happened for this guy specifically is he's from Northern California, and he was excited to, at some point in the future, retire in Naples, Florida. Now, a bunch of his friends had moved to Naples over the years. He's tired of the Northern California political climate, the regulatory climate. He's tired of some of the things that's happening in Northern California. And he's like, hey, I'm going to move down to Naples too. So he builds a house on spec in this Naples, California 55 plus community for $750,000. And he decides, hey, I'm just going to move down there when I'm ready to retire. He managed to get the house rented for the first lease for $5,000 a month, which is okay. You know, it's not the best, it's not the worst. It's a respectable amount of money, all right? But then as time goes by, the first renter leaves and the area kind of overbuilds. Now that leads us to our first big problem. He didn't have enough experience in the market to spend $750,000 that way if he wasn't just going to move into the house and live. If you're going to move into the house and live, feel free to spend whatever you want on it. If you're going to get into my business, single family residential real estate investing and renting, yeah, you've got to approach it very systematically. The problem for him is they got this $5,000 a month for, I think, a lease and a half, maybe 18 months. And then this last time around, he says, hey, they finished all these units. The market's turned against us. There's actually a lot of units that have been built in this neighborhood, and now we can't get it to rent. It has now been on the market for 6 straight months, and they have dropped the rent over and over and over and over. Now they're trying to rent it for $3,600 a month. At this point, he calls me, and he is like, we can't even get it rented for $3,600 a month. Can you save this situation? The problem is, I'm a miracle worker. If you bought in the right market, if you bought at the right price point, if you bought with the right amount of demand, this one's just wrong on all sorts of levels. So it's sat vacant. The biggest problem, I said, with this property is that his market for renting is tiny. All right, you want the biggest market you can possibly have if you're going to be renting real estate. You want a piece of real estate that really appeals to a ton of first-time home buyers and a ton of last-time renters, right? You know, that middle market where everyone kind of wants a similar house. Works for renters, works for buyers. You want that for a lot of reasons. Primarily, I do not believe in permanently depleting housing stock. I understand we have a housing crisis in the U.S. I understand that single-family residential contributes somewhat to that crisis. I do not want to be a part of permanent housing stock depletion. So what I think is, hey, you want to use a house for a couple of years, provide housing for people. That's a need also. The ability to rent has its own value. I've rented a bunch in my life. There's been a bunch of times in my life where I did not know if I was going to be in that market very long. I did not know if the job was going to last in the market that I lived in. Things were a little shaky in my financial situation. And renting was what I needed to do. I didn't need to commit and pay closing costs and start taking care of, none of those things worked for me. There is a reason that renting is important in a market. The problem is when you buy a house like this guy did. He bought a house that was only ever going to be rented by a retiree over 55 years old because he bought in a community where it was 55 plus. That immediately just reduces the number of potential renters down from a huge lake to a tiny little maybe nothing lake, right? Where there might not be any people. Beyond that, the socioeconomics of that decision is enormous, all right? Like 55 years old who wants to live in Florida in a $750,000 house, that person probably has assets. The person that you're thinking of that wants to live there probably is selling a house somewhere else and retiring in Florida. They don't want to be sitting on a $750,000 rent. They want to own the asset. And so not only are you only appealing to people who are 55 plus, but you're also only appealing to 55 plus who can't buy that house. And so what I told him was, hey, you bought a really particular rental situation here. In all candor, the decision you need to be making is whether you are going to move or not. All right? If you're going to move to that house, maybe it makes sense to rent it at a loss or a break even for a couple more years. If you're never planning on moving to Florida, you might want to just sell the house and reposition your assets. Now, with that being the case, I can help with that, right? My firm has helped people buy over 5,000 properties, single family residential. That's my biggest company. That's the biggest company and the biggest all that I've ever done. How do you buy single family residential in markets that you don't live in and keep them mostly passive without them driving you freaking crazy? That is my company. That's bedrock, right? With that being the case, if he wants to sell the property and move on, I can help him reposition assets and avoid capital gains and get good performing rentals. If his goal is to keep that asset and have me kind of wave a magic wand and make that asset work, nothing I can do there. I just had to tell him, hey, I may be a miracle worker for your friend, but there's nothing I can do in this situation. It's like The Big Short says. It's like trying to win the Indianapolis 500 riding a donkey. He just started off all wrong, and there's no way for me to jump in at this point and save that asset. He can sell the asset. He can go buy the right type of asset, and that asset can perform beautifully over time. Now, with that being the case, that was my recommendation. There's 3 real lessons to have from this call. Number 1, if you're gonna buy property in a market where you don't live, make sure you have some experts that you trust in that market. It could be Bedrock, it could be anyone else who does this, but the truth is you've got to have someone that you trust to be able to find, vet, and buy houses. Number 2, make sure you're buying assets that actually are going to rent long term. If you're going to get into the single family residential game, make sure you're not buying a $750,000 house in a 55 plus gated community, unless you are fine with that risk position. I am not. I think that sounds like a horrible idea, but I was not his advisor on that. I hope to be able to help him in the future, right? And number 3, make sure you're buying the right property. Our secret sauce isn't even that secret. Like, we try to be the McDonald's of rental real estate. We're always buying 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, Class A, Class B neighborhoods, garages, nice schools. We're doing a lot of research behind the scenes to say, hey, does this tick every single box? Per deal that we put in front of a client, we vet almost 30 deals, right? And that's after 5,000 deals worth of experience. And so, like, we throw deals out, put a deal in front of a client. Usually our clients see 5 to 10 deals before they make an offer on one. Usually the client will make offers on 15 to 20 deals before one gets accepted. And so for one deal that we buy, we have probably done 300 sets of diligence, 400 sets of diligence, and we're only buying kind of 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, Class A, Class B neighborhoods. And so the expertise that we bring to bear is insane, especially compared to, like, I have got a wild lark. I'm going to go buy a property in this market I don't know and just hope it all works out. That's not a plan. Hope is not a plan. All right, so with that being the case, make sure you're buying the right property, have the right approach to the right property, make sure your team knows what they're doing. As I said, we've bought about 5,000 properties across the country. That's what we buy. We buy that all the time. 1980s or newer, 3-bed, 2-bath, 4-bed, 2-bath, Class A or B neighborhood. My team's bought about 5,000 of those. If you just want to have a conversation, talk about your portfolio, talk about how it's doing, have a good conversation with someone who's going to be honest with you. I didn't do any business with this guy. I just gave this guy honest advice. Hey, you've got to make a decision whether you're going to keep it or you're going to sell it. You've got to make a decision whether you're going to reinvest and avoid your capital gains or whether you're going to go ahead and pay your capital gains. You've got to make a decision what type of assets you want to be involved in and what level of ownership and control you want in those assets. And he said, that's all good advice. I've got another property that I'm selling really soon. I'll give you a call. So I like this guy. I hope to do business with this guy. If you ever have a question, feel free to call us. We're always happy to have a conversation, help you understand your assets better, help you understand what it costs to get into rental real estate. At today's price point, what I'm looking to buy is between $185 and $350. Down payment, reserves, LLC setup, compliance, all that. To get into the real estate game, you need about 50 to 70 grand. All right. Hope you enjoyed that. Have a good day. Love you guys. Bye-bye. All right, now that I have finished watching that video and doing my editing, I think if you are following along the channel and you want a recommendation, the video you're going to like the most is the case of the Derpier garage conversion. It is a hilarious story of one of our properties that didn't rent for a mysterious reason, and over time we realized what it was. You're going to have to go watch that. It is wild. It was just a wild experience. I don't want to ruin it for you. The case of the Derpier garage conversion. I hope you love that. I'll put it right here. Have a good day. Bye-bye.